Hi, I'm Rolla David, and we welcome you to our show, The Divorce Project. Are you or someone you know going through a divorce or a custody battle? Well, our show offers caring solutions and legal guidance to help you create a healthy family dynamic during a divorce and post-divorce. Next, you'll meet the host of The Divorce Project, family law attorney Barry Fisher. On each show, Barry brings together family specialists, parents, and children into a conversation about divorce and highlight the positive and mindful solutions that can result when we all work together.
Welcome to the Divorce Project. Thank you for returning. We're happy to have you viewing with us. We have a very special show for you today. It's about the do's and don'ts of divorce. And especially relating to custody and visitation and how you treat your children. I'm Barry Fisher. I'm a family law attorney. I've been doing this for 26 years. And during the course of the show, we're going to try to not only entertain you, but educate you as to the do's and don'ts for parents. We have a very honored guest today, Judge Robert Axel, retired judge from the Superior Court. He sat on the court for 36 years. He's now in mediation, or he's sometimes used as a master in a case to help facilitate things. And he's seen everything in family law, and he's presided over 300,000 cases. So we consider him an expert, and we'll be able to get his insights about the do's and don'ts. Thank you for being here today, Judge Axel.
My pleasure. This is a very important and dear to my heart area.
Judge Axel, why don't you give us a little background on what you've done in the area of children's problems when they're facing this divorce and custody situation?
Well, when I was on the bench, I would try to make it a point to say to the parents, the children are the victims of this situation. They didn't cause it, but we have to consider what's best for them in the total growing up situation, and to consider that when we make a decision or a choice. Unfortunately, parents don't follow that situation all the time, and I've seen too many cases where the children end up being the loser.
Now, you also did 20 years in the juvenile courts. Delinquency courts. So can you tell the public what that was?
Those are crimes committed by persons under the age of 18, range from petty theft to murder. The children that I would see were children, for a great degree, were the product of broken homes. The broken homes didn't cause the difficulty, but it was a main contributing factor. And we had one of those things was taken into consideration when we decided ultimately, if they were convicted, what we would do on their behalf to assist them in getting back on track.
And one of the things that dovetails nicely from the juvenile delinquency cases, into the family court is how to teach parents to do the right thing during the custody and visitation so that this doesn't happen to their children.
That's true, and it's not necessarily going to result in the children being delinquents. But the problem is when we have children being pulled back and forth between parents, depending on their age, and when the divorce or separation commences, that a number of things go on with the child that end up being a benchmark for that child throughout his growing up years.
And very difficult for the child, once having that experience, to go beyond that experience and change their life later.
That's true. You can't erase what's done. And your child's psychiatrist and psychologist will tell you that the formative years are extremely important even before birth. I was amazed at some of the education that the judges get about early childhood development. We have programs that are presented to us on a yearly basis in terms of what goes on with a child in forming the traits and conduct that they'll achieve. That, coupled with the intelligence level of the child and a number of factors, ends up having a child be cast in a certain light. And the problem is that when parents start arguing with each other, start pulling at the children, it does tremendous damage to the children.
And when you say damage, you mean that psychologically and emotionally the children lose something in their development and then it's difficult for them to function later as a whole person.
Correct. And I've maintained for years that before you have a child, you should get a license because the parents don't uniformly and on a regular basis have a lot of education before they conceive a child or start raising a child. And if they would read the psychological books regarding the child raising in early childhood years, they'd be amazed.
What can you recommend to parents in our audience if they're contemplating divorce and they have children? What could they do in the family unit to lessen the problems that are going to occur to the children?
I think probably the number one thing I would recommend is not place the children in the middle. Not put the child in a position of feeling they have to make a choice between mommy or daddy, or in a situation, or in our current society, mommy and mommy or daddy and daddy, and that the parents should have in mind foremost the fact that the child is the one that's going to suffer if they don't take the child's well-being into account. Now, well-being is a broad term, but and I've always been amazed at how many people I've seen over the years that inflict damage on the child, and then maybe with time the child is 13, 14 years old and they're doing something really bad, law breaking and so forth, and they say, that's not my fault. I couldn't imagine that Johnny would do that. How does this happen? And they wring their hands in the appropriate manner, but it doesn't do any good. It's too late.
See, in my experience with the cases that I've seen, I try to teach the parents to put the children first. And it's very difficult for parents to put children first because they're going through their own anxiety, their own fears, their own upset. Their whole lives have been turned upside down in this divorce. So they're like struggling to just find their own way, and they forget that the children are being affected by everything that they do.
I would say that's pretty uniform in most every domestic relation problem. But if anything that the parent could glean out of our program today is, unfortunately, if you're going to get into a divorce situation, before you actually commence the discussion with the other side, think about what should happen with the child and how that's going to affect the child. And this goes through a gradation of ages. When you have a young child, a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, it's different than when you have a 12 or 15-year-old. But the fact is that the same factors are uniform through each age level, and it's important that parents think about it before they get into their combat.
Yes. It's interesting because a lot of people don't understand that judicial officers like yourself go through a lot of training to become a judicial officer. Could you tell the audience what kind of training you have?
Well, we don't get the training beforehand. We get it while we're doing it. But the LA Superior Court has had an excellent program over a long time to provide the judges with educational programs as to psychological, physiological, all kinds of training regarding the needs of children and how that evolves. And I was amazed through some of the CJA programs that I attended to find out that input with a child goes on while the child's still in the womb, and that they were able to test and see that activity resulted from whatever goes on between the parents down the line, and it's amazing to me how that worked.
I've appeared before many, many different judicial officers in family law, and what I've discovered is that almost all of them really try to be objective, fair, and unbiased. I know a lot of people walk around thinking they didn't get a fair shake from the judge, that there might be some predisposition, like there's this group called Father's Rights Group that say, oh, we're not being treated fairly, the mothers are favored, the mother always gets more custody. Well, do you think that's true, or do you think the judicial officers are being fair with everyone?
I think it is not true, and I know the same groups that you've talked about over the years. The difficulty is that when somebody's in a lawsuit, one half of the group is going to be unhappy. One's going to consider themselves a winner, the other a loser. And in the family law arena particularly, that's very easy to do because it's an emotional reaction to what happens. I can assure you from the years that I've been involved with other judges and programs that are done with judges that there's a real significant effort made not to be biased one way or the other, but to take into consideration the factors that go into making a decision where it's so important that the children's lives are considered. And if it works out that the father's the better person for the child, that's great, and that's usually the order. But I can understand how the public will, and particularly the legal profession, sometimes can say, we don't get a fair shake because we didn't win.
Well, it is true that the judges are obligated to follow the laws of the state. And the legislature has enacted laws that says we want both parents to have frequent and continuous contact with all the children. We want both parents to be involved in the child's life. We want both parents to support the child. We want both parents to be active. So the judges have to follow that because that is the law in California. And that law is passed to promote that both parents stay connected to each of their children, and that each of their children feel that their parents are connected to them, because the standard is the best interest of the child. And the judges will follow the rules and will look to what is the best interest of the child. And so when the judge makes a ruling, the judge has weighed all the evidence, heard all the testimony, has heard from the experts, and then decided, you know what, this is what's best for this child today, and just today, because all orders in family law, visitation and custody are temporary orders. They can always be modified up until the child of majority, until 18 years old. So they're temporary orders. They're a snapshot of what's best for the children at that time. Let's say the mother only gets 10% visitation, and then she improves herself. Can she go back to court and ask the court to modify the existing custodial orders?
Yes, that happens quite regularly. You have a number of factors occurring here. The idea in a lawsuit that the parties feel that there's going to be a winner or a loser. If one side thinks they got what they wanted, they consider that they've won. When it comes to the child's situation, it's really difficult, and I made a real effort in the cases that I've handled over the years to make it a point with the parents that the first thing they think about before they take a posture with the other side is, what do you think is best for the child? Answer that question, and then go about whatever intercourse you're going to go with the other side. But if you decide that your posture isn't best for the child, don't feel badly to change your mind and have reasons for it. After you've answered the question, what's best for the child, ask the question, why? And once you've answered that, then start talking to the other side, and then you can convince the other side that that should happen with the child. Those are rational things to do. The downside of this whole thing is that when people are in this situation, they very rarely are rational. The emotion takes over. So and the lawyers have an obligation, in my opinion, to tell people when they first interview them in their office that we're not going to win or lose in this custody situation. I'll listen to what you want, tell me why you want it, and I'll look to sell it to the judge. But the idea is that you must have reasons for it, and then follow up with action.
Yeah, so many clients come into my office and they say, I want full custody. And I said, okay, does the other spouse drink, use alcohol, use drugs? Are they not involved in the child's life? And the answer is no, they're a good dad or a good mother. I go, well, it's not going to happen. And, you know, it's very hard for people to understand. But I'm more stable. Well, that might be an argument. If it's the best interest that the child stays with you more because you're more stable, no problem. But you're fighting an uphill battle because the courts want to give everyone joint custody. The courts want to give everyone equal time if both parents want to be involved. Now, I noticed that in cases where you have newborn children, under 3 years old, would it be appropriate for the court to favor that the baby stay more with the mother?
It's not a matter of the courts favoring it. Your psychiatrist and psychologist will tell you that there are certain factors that you look to as to what the best posture for the children might be. And that it may well be that if the father is in a better situation to be able to take care of a child in a given posture, the court will say, fine, we'll have it with the father. But at the really infant stage, for example, the father can do a great job in nurturing the child and doing what's necessary. But there are practical things like if the mother's breastfeeding, if the father is in a position not to have the time necessary to care for the child, all the things that you'd look at if a layperson was trying to make a decision as to what's best for the child.
And I'd like to go over a little bit about the parent's responsibility in developing and creating a positive parenting plan. And could you tell the audience what a parenting plan is?
A parenting plan is a program developed, hopefully between the parents, as to what should happen with the child in its growing years. Schooling, who's going to provide the transportation to schooling, where the child is going to reside, has a bedroom, not a bedroom, how many other children there are involved. There's a lot of factors that go in to the parenting plan. But generically, a parenting plan is a program laid out to have the parents think through what is going to happen with the child during those growing years when the parents are apart. And then if it's appropriate, based on the age of the children or child, the abilities of the child, the needs of the child, any problems with the child, all those things are factored in to the plan.
You know, some parents don't realize, I've seen this in a lot of my cases, where initially, you know, when they're married and they have the kids, they see the kids every day. It's kind of normal.
Right.
They see them for breakfast, they drive them to school, they go to work, they come back, they're there for dinner, they tuck them in, read them a story, watch TV with them, and they go through divorce, and then all of a sudden, they're not seeing the child every day.
Right.
Now it's restricted to 50% or less, the involvement. This is a great impact on the child. The child living in one home with two parents and then going to living in two homes. So what are some of the do's and don'ts that we should advise the parents to make sure they do and they don't do in terms of communications with their spouse in front of their children and to their children?
Well, the first thing, and I've said this many, many times in the courtroom, it's not a contest. The one who has the child the most time doesn't win. And that if the child's needs are covered by both parents, that's great. Many times we get into arguments and discussions about a timeshare where a person has the child 3 days a week and the other parent has the child 4 days a week. That's fine, but it causes a difficulty for the child. Depending on where the parents live, how cooperative they are between themselves, and a number of other factors go into that decision. But the point is initially that the parents need to ask themselves, what's going to be best for this child at this age, and how can I provide that? And it's not a contest. The one who has the child the most doesn't win.
You know, I think when parents decide they're going to go through a divorce, one of the best things they could do for their children and their family is to sit down together with their children and have a conversation and say, look, this is what's going to happen. Mom and Dad aren't getting along. We decided to separate and go our own ways, but we're both still going to be your parents and we both still love you, and reassure them and say, we may have two different households and all these things may happen, but you're the most important things to us. So everything we do, we're going to take you into account. So as you're going through this, as we're going through this process, please talk to us about how you feel, what's going on in your mind, what are you afraid of, and just know, we love you, and we love you, we love you, we love you. Parents forget to say it.
And what you've laid out, I think, is the ideal program that the parents need to think through and adopt before they start the divorce proceedings, because the children end up being the victim of what the parents have gone through. And that if the children know that their lives are not going to be totally upside down, they won't have the reliability of seeing daddy or mommy because they're going to cover that, the parents are going to cover that with the timeshare, And it might be a little different, but it's not going to be the end of the world.
You know, one of the most important things is parents not to argue in front of their children. Arguments in front of their children devastate the children. It devastates them. It shuts them down. They get emotionally upset. They get frightened. Don't argue. The best thing is to never speak negatively in front of the children about the other parent or about what's going on in the divorce. Never speak about the divorce in front of your children. Would you agree?
I agree wholeheartedly. And you've laid out some marvelous ground rules for the parents to think about ahead of time and then to follow. And I realize, and I've seen it over a number of years, when the parents are in a very difficult emotional state, it's tough to remember to follow those rules. But the result and outcome, in light of the fact that the kids are not able to erase that from their memory or erase that from their developmental posture, that if they don't do that type of thing that we've discussed, the impact is long-reaching. It'll be with the child until adulthood and who knows how long. So the short answer is yes, try to do those type of things to lessen the impact on the children.
Also, it's very good that the parents agree on a parenting plan rather than go to the court and say, Judge, you decide. Now, can you give us some insight into that?
Well, let me put it this way. The judicial officer that's handling the case is happy to decide. That's what we get paid for. After you hear all the evidence from both sides, as you've indicated, we make a call. And, you know, in the old story in a lawsuit, when there's a winner and a loser, somebody's happy and somebody's not. And if the person gets what they want, they think they've won. But in reality, it's not winning, per se. The point is that if they're able to agree on things ahead of time, are able to work out an appropriate parenting plan, meaning that dad has the children on certain dates and times, and mom has the children on other times, that if they do that, then everybody's a winner.
You know, I hear clients go into court. In fact, I was in court this morning, and one client said to Judge Gordon, I won 50%. Yeah. And Judge Gordon looked at him and said, okay, does that mean 1 week on, 1 week off? Does that mean you have them in the daytime and he has them in the nighttime? No, it doesn't really work like that. What they want to know is, what day of the week do you want? What hour of the day? Who's going to drive them to school? The specifics. Don't look for 50%. Look for what's good for your child.
And the reason they ask for that, and again, I've seen that on a regular basis for years, they think that's going to affect the resultant child support numbers. And it's motivated by their own financial situation, and they figure that because it's 50%, they're going to have a different monetary factor. And let me share with everybody that very rarely happens. In all the cases that I've handled, colleagues in Norwalk, where I was for 17 years, and the people downtown, the judges, that the percentage affects the child support figures, not necessarily the timeshare, and that it's impossible to get a 50-50 timeshare, physically almost impossible, except for the 1 week on, 1 week off. You can argue that that's 50%. But I get a kick out of it every time somebody would ask for that, because my reaction would say, what do you think that means? And the answer uniformly, even though you're represented by a lawyer, was, I don't know.
One of the best things you could do for your children in a divorce and a custody plan is make a specific pattern and keep the pattern constant so that the child can rely on Monday I'm going to be with dad, on Wednesday I'm going to be with mom, on Friday I'm going to be back with dad. That really helps the child. Keep your promises with your children. If you tell them you're going to show up, show up. That's like the worst thing you could do to your child is say, oh, I'm sorry I can't make it, I'm too busy, I got work, I'll see you next week. It devastates the child when the parent doesn't show up. Remember, these children think that it's their fault that you're going through the divorce. You have to reassure them. You have to comfort them. You have to love them. You have to be child-centered. That's really the important traits that you have to carry on in terms of a divorce. Consistency
is very important, but along that same line, The parent who is not consistent creates uncertainty in the child that ends up being evidenced by a number of things. If you see the child, for example, when parents have modified the custody program one way or the other, if you see the child's having problems in school, as having problems with other children, you observe outward behavior of the child being different than when they were together, the parent should know right away there's something wrong. And so when the parents examine that themselves and discuss it between the two of them, they can many times belay that difficulty if they are consistent. That doesn't mean you can't change the program. You can say, this weekend I'm going someplace else, and could you take the child for this weekend? Trade off back and forth in that way, but do it in a manner that doesn't unnerve the child.
Yeah, I agree with you. We're at the close of our show. Judge Axel, Honorable Judge Robert Axel, I want to thank you so much for being here today. I want to thank the audience for tuning in today. We're going to be here every week giving information, trying to help you, educate you about family law, divorce, custody, visitation, financial issues. We want to thank Romeo Carey, the director of KBEV Studios. KBEV Studios is a completely school-run, Beverly Hills High School-run station. This program has been produced, directed, edited, and broadcast to you all by students. High school students are doing this, and they do a fabulous job. And we thank your audience for being here, and we thank them for being here, and thank you again, Judge Axel.
Thank you for inviting me, and hopefully we did some good for the people who are listening.
I'm sure we did. Thank you.
We thank you for tuning in and invite you, our viewing audience, to participate in the next week's conversation. On the Divorce Project, our goal is to help bring the healthy outcome that your family deserves. Please email your questions to team@thedivorceproject.com or call us directly at the number on your screen.